I'm Robert Emmett Hernan. I have Blue Stacks Productions, Inc., the publisher of Irish Environment, an online resource for environmental matters on the island of Ireland. We're here today for another in our series of conversations on environmental matters, and today I'm very pleased to welcome John McMillen. John, you're very welcome.
It's a great pleasure to be able to talk with you, Paul.
John is the Executive Director for the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, and you started, John, in January of 2010?
January 2010, so I've been here 11 months now.
11 months. Now, could you just give the audience a kind of a broad sense of what the agency is and what it does?
Yeah, the agency is an agency within the Department of the Environment for Northern Ireland, and it's unique within the British Isles in that it brings together both the natural heritage, built heritage, and environmental protection within one agency. And I think in most countries in Europe, and certainly within the British Isles, you'll find 3 separate agencies doing that. So it means the work of the agency is very, very diverse. And every day since I've been here has been a bit of an adventure finding what we do. So we cover everything from dangerous wild animals, if people want to retain those, we need a licence from us, right through to castles. We have country parks, we look after pollution, we look after air emissions, we look after land waste. So a very, very wide portfolio of work we have to do in implementing over 200 pieces of environmental legislation in Northern Ireland.
And how many staff members are there in the agency?
Approximately 700 staff members.
And what would that be in comparison to other agencies within the government? Be one of the larger ones?
It's one of the, well, not really. Planning Service would have a lot more, for example, within the Department of Environment, and many other agencies would be big, but it's a substantial agency of size with a annual turnover of just under £50 million at the moment.
Okay. Now, John, that kind of gives us a broad sense of what the department does. Could you differentiate for us and for the audience what the environmental agency does versus what the Department of the Environment does?
Yeah, well, obviously the agency is a constituent part of the Department of the Environment and was set up that way post-devolution in 2007 by Minister Foster at the time, when the decision was taken not to have an independent agency. But it was decided then the agency looked after the operational side of the business and the implementation of the regulations and policing of those and enforcing. And the department itself, the core department, was the policy arm and retained policy responsibility for that.
And now within the Department of Environment, there's the climate change unit. That's a policy function within that department. Is that correct?
That's correct. The environmental policy side deals with many issues, including the new wildlife bill, waste calamity of the land, climate change, a whole range of environmental policy issues being dealt with as they come along there.
And there's also a sustainable development unit within the office of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister. And what's that function of that office?
It recognises that environmental policy is only one part of sustainable development, and that the State Development Office has an economic and social pillars, and the Office of the First Deputy Minister's Sustainable Development Unit is overarching across government to make sure there's a strategy for the executive which deals with all 3 pillars, including the environment.
Now, that's a very nice, clean distinction between the enforcement and operations and the policy, but now that's been muddied a bit because you have a new responsibility, I gather.
Yes, I'm not quite sure it's muddied. We still have the separation of them, but because of the department has been going through very difficult financial times the past year because of the fall off in economic activity and construction, which has led to a reduction in planning applications, reduction in fees, and the planning service, therefore, our budget's been under pressure. And as part of the restructuring of the department to meet those pressures, corporate services was taken out from each of the various agencies brought centrally. So the scale and the separation between the department and the agency was lessened, and that also applied to the environmental policy side. And in order to get greater efficiency, it was decided to bring environmental policy and the agency under one deputy secretary, which is migrated within the department. So the 2 are still separate and come together within my head now, rather than two separate line management functions. Some may see that as a diminution of the lessening of the gap between them. However, we're already starting to see that actually synergies are improved, and that my oversight of both and is allowing us to flag up issues on both sides and get better use of resource. And the policy side should very much be about good policy experts able to deal with policy issues, but drawing on the expertise and the science base that's in the agency and other sources of us, academia and other places. So we're able to access those much better, much more quickly now. And I think we're beginning to see the benefits of having the 2 come together, say, under one line manager, although they're still running separate groups of staff at the moment.
One of the interesting things about the many things that you do is in the planning area. And I thought we might spend a few minutes talking about that. It's become a very hot issue these days, certainly with incinerators in Glenavy and in Belfast. Could you explain for the audience what the role of the Environment Agency is in the planning process here?
Yeah. The agency is a consultee in all relevant planning applications. So when the planning service receive in that planning application which has, they believe, an environmental side to it, and that could be anything from an alteration to a listed building, which would be interesting to built heritage people, to something like a major plant such as an incinerator in an area, protected area. They would refer that to us for consultation, and we would advise them as to whether, for example, in the early stages, whether they need an environmental statement, or if there was an area which was designated or impacting a designated site, whether it needed Article 6 assessment carried out, etc. We would get involved in those sorts of issues.
Who is they, John, that would refer to the planning
service?
Okay,
which is another agency within the department.
Okay. And we'll come to that because there's some changes that may be happening there. So if the planning agency makes a determination that it might be important to have the input from the Environment Agency, they'll refer that application over to you.
Yes.
And then on what basis or criteria do you use to assess that planning application?
We would assess it against, first of all, there's a series of planning policy statements which the department has, which set out many issues which will be taken into account in planning, and a lot of those are around environmental, or maybe with renewable energies. For example, there's a planning policy statement there. We would assess it against that. We would also assess the application against any designation or protection we have on the site or the land, whether it's a site which is being protected for rare birds, a habitats directive site, whether it's an area of outstanding natural beauty, etc. Looking at what potential emissions there may be from the applicant and how that might impact on the water bodies or air quality within the area, and seeing whether any restrictions have to be put there. We would also be looking at on some applications the impact it might have on the landscape, and whether that would impact on an area, say, of outstanding natural beauty or one of our landscapes, etc., and making comments on that and any mitigating measures that might be put in to do that.
And how large a responsibility is that within the, how many applications are you having to deal with every year?
The number of applications is sometimes difficult to determine because we work in the county of the consultations, and because of our multiple function, we can be consulted on 2 or 3 aspects of an application. But certainly it's well over 5,000 applications every year. Consultation, sorry, we would have, and we have a service level agreement which sets our targets for how quickly we have to respond to those. So, and it's obviously, it's one of those big economic drivers, and therefore there's a lot of interest in making sure we do keep the process going well, and we're measured quite hard at that. So it is pretty resource intensive. Whilst sometimes it's arms and legs and people doing it, we would assess it probably about 40 full-time equivalent staff working on planning applications through the year, just keeping that process going. So it's quite a resource-intensive activity for us, an important one.
Recently, Mr. Poots announced that there are plans by the government to return the planning application function to local authorities, and that may be some years off or not. But what do you anticipate the changing role for the department in that process if that takes place?
Well, for the department, obviously then the detailed planning function will move from planning service being an agency of the department to local government, and that's been coming for some long because the Review of Public Administration had that in it originally when it was under direct rule. So we've been planning towards that, and Minister Poots has just reaffirmed that that's going to happen. From the agency point of view, not a huge amount of difference on the normal routine consultations and plannings. One area where it will affect us though is that we do have a team which work with our colleagues in planning service on area plans for the province, and they tend to work as part of the team rather than being a consultee. When and if that function passes to planning local government, we will then become consultees for area plans, etc., and they will have to have their own support to the planning. So there will be a change in relationship there, and a change of resource application.
Is some part of the plan to have some of the planning service personnel assigned then to some of the local authorities?
They will transfer.
Some of those.
Their employer will become the local authorities, and that has happened before in reorganisation of local government, and will continue. Many functions will transfer to local authorities, planning people and the staff involved on planning applications will become employees of local government.